Welcome back to the Manage to Win podcast. We have a fun show today. We're going to talk about energy. So do I have more energy in my voice, right? I'm going to interview Garreth Evans of Veckta, and he is on a mission to help companies lower their energy costs. Really great conversation, fun, enjoyable stuff, learning experience. Certainly learned a lot. I think you'll enjoy it. Please don't forget to check out our sponsor, Habitly.com. Learn the soft skills of highly successful people. It helps your teams work much better together. It's inexpensive. It's effective. It works. And of course, I'm biased. I wrote the trainings. But anyway, I think you'll really enjoy it. Check it out at Habitly.com. First 7 days free. We're going to dive in with Gareth, and he really wants to change things, make it better. And there's a lot of energy transition going on. We're on this huge grid of energy, and it may get less reliable in the future. So you might want to think about what Gareth has to say. And he's not biased. He just operates a marketplace with Veckta where you can consider the best move you can make for your organization. Let's dive in. Gareth, you and your team are working on really saving energy. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show is because it's a passion of mine. One of many. I have too many. But it's really struck me lately just with cars. And, I'm 66 years old, and I think in the 70s, we had the first oil embargo where things shut down. Gas went extremely high. I think it went up to $1 a gallon, and we were all shocked. And we'd love to have that price now. But I really do get worried about energy really makes a nation strong and safe. And what are you guys doing to help individuals, companies? I think you're mainly working with corporations, but really do a better job, be better stewards of the energy they're using, so we can keep going, keep growing.
Yeah, no, you're spot on, David. I think it does need to be a concern for businesses, governments, consumers like you and I. I think energy, as you know, is the lifeblood of everything. And as we electrify more and more of our appliances, of our businesses, of our transportation, it's going to become even more critical. And we feel it right at the fuel pump. That's the very tangible item. But then I think a lot of people are seeing it in their utility bills as well. And our customers are coming to us saying in the last year they've seen 40% increases in their utility rates. And how do you build a business around that uncertainty? It's impossible. And so we are firm believers that the energy transition is, a generational opportunity, but it's one that needs to be done in a really purposeful way such that we get profitable and sustainable outcomes. Sustainability shouldn't come at the cost of profitability. When done right, they can go hand in hand. And so that's what we're super passionate about, is how can we support businesses around the world to really adapt to this opportunity, which is we've got access now to technologies where we can get cleaner, cheaper, and more resilient power without having to rely on this kind of monopolistic, centralized infrastructure that we've all come to rely on.
Yeah. And we had that in California. I think they deregulated, I live in California, the energy. And so PG&E was a huge provider here. And they made it so they had to open up the power lines to allow other people to provide whatever. And I've never followed how well that went. But why don't you take a moment now and kind of explain what your company's doing at Veckta to help companies achieve this?
Yeah. So the real opportunity here, David, is that today we're all passive consumers of energy, from you and I to businesses. We pay the utility bill. We don't know where the energy comes from, if we'll get it, and we have no control over the price of it. And in the last few years, the technology prices for solar, for storage, for gas turbines, for electric vehicle charging stations have all aggressively come down. And so the capabilities exist for us to be able to generate and store energy right at our places of work, places of residence. But knowing what technologies to consider, what the opportunity is, how you should go about assessing the options, procuring them, it's a very complex landscape. So what we support our commercial industrial business customers to do is, how am I consuming energy today? What's it costing me? What's my emission profile? And what are my pain points? Is it the escalating costs? Is it the power going off? Is it that I've got emission reduction targets to hit? Is it a combination of those things? What are the solution sets available to me? And then we help them configure the optimal energy configuration for their business. So is it solar? Is it storage? Is it EV chargers? What size should they be? And then how do you competitively go to market and get suppliers to quote you to then come and install that system and operate it? And the real opportunity here is you can install a system that will last for 20 or 30 years, essentially lock in your costs, reduce your emissions. And because now you've got this system at your premises, the security factor of energy resiliency goes up, because you're not now at the end of a fragile, long transmission line that was built 50, 60, 80, 100 years ago, and has the risk of a tree falling on it or a squirrel crawling into a substation and knocking the power out, and you have no control over that. Whereas now you can generate free energy from the sun, from wind, store it in a battery, use it, and reduce your bills accordingly.
So I've got a lot of questions, but maybe you can give me an example of a client that has done this, because, so much of America, speaking with that bias since I'm here, and I know it's global, you turn on a light switch, you just expect it to go on.
Yeah.
And you don't expect it to go off. And you're so shocked when power goes out, or you're like, oh no. And I think it's been a big help to move to LED lighting, and you would know better than me, just with the lower power consumption. But, I've still got power for my internet, like right now, using this and whatever else I might have going on. And so what's a typical type of customer that comes to you? How many employees, whether it's one building, multiple buildings, and what does their prior situation look like? And then what did it look like after they worked with you to engage people, that could help them implement something? And how does that change? And I'm particularly interested, of course, I don't want you to talk too long without a break, but I'm particularly interested in the storage side, because I've heard so much that's a huge challenge, that even if you've got wonderful solar on here, or whatever, if you can't store it, it's going back in the transmission lines, and then you're still dependent on the reliability of that line.
Yeah. So let's start with you comment about outages. For sure, like, energy is this magical thing that we've all come to just expect to be there. We don't know really. Most people don't know how it's generated. They don't understand that this complex web of lines and generators has to always be in balance. And it's super complex, and it's amazing, and it's an engineering feat that we should all celebrate. And up until now, that centralized grid has served us really well, over 100 years. Amazing. But now it's aging, it's becoming less reliable. And the stat from the Department of Energy is that we're suffering about $150 billion worth of lost economic activity as a result of power outages per year. So this isn't a small issue, and it's only increasing. And so it's a real opportunity for us to disrupt and adapt to a new way of working. And so, as an example, because you're in California, let's use California. We've got a manufacturing customer right now in the LA basin. They produce steel products, so very energy intensive. We looked at how are they consuming energy today, which is from their local utility, and they also have to pay more at certain times of day, typically peak hours between 4 and 9 p.m. So what we looked at is, with a limited footprint for them, what technologies could help them reduce their costs and reduce their emissions. They were the two big priorities. And as well, if they could gain some resilience benefit, that would be a bonus. And so looking at their system for an investment of $2.5 million, they were able to reduce their annual energy costs by over $450,000 per year. With the incentives that were available, they'd be able to pay off the system in less than a year, and they're able to reduce their emissions by 25%. And so you can see like the benefits stack up really quickly. And that was for a fairly small system because they had a limited roof space and car park to put the solar. But once you start expanding that out to other facilities where they've got big car parks, big roof spaces, the economics are incredible. And so we can support customers from the local microbrewery with one site up to corporate customers with hundreds of sites all around the world. And really, it's about where are you going to get the greatest return on investment? Where should you put your time and money? What project should you never, ever think about because you're buying super cheap energy, the local area never suffers outages. So really just helping people understand what's possible, where should I focus, what should I build, and who should build it for me.
So that brings up an interesting part of what you do in that it sounds like you're kind of, maybe this isn't the best analogy, but you're kind of like Switzerland. So it's like you don't have a bias. It's like me, I'm wired. I don't have a bias except for the best way to do it.
Yeah.
And so the beauty of going to a company like yours is that, I get to basically spill my guts on the problem I'm facing. And you're not going to say, go this way because we make more money when you go this way.
Exactly.
You're going to say, here's the realistic. You just mentioned, you may come back and say you shouldn't make any change because your energy is cheap.
Yeah.
And it's reasonably reliable.
I love this. I love the Switzerland analogy. But yeah, we're completely independent and agnostic. We want to be the central interface point. And to your comment, suppliers today, the supply side of the market is awesome, but they know way too much and they want to sell you a product or a widget or a service. And the customers have never ever had to think about energy ever. It's been a single line item in their operational budget. Now they're starting to think about it. They don't have the internal expertise. They don't want to spend millions of dollars on a consultant. And they don't want to be at the mercy of being sold to by a supplier. They want to understand what are my options. So yeah, we help them really cut through all that noise, take all that complexity, simplify it down into a real succinct business case, and then say, here's the people who you should go to market and get quotes from. And then we help them compare the quotes side by side, all technology enabled. The beauty of using technology is it removes all the emotion from it. So people will come into these scenarios thinking, I know exactly what system I need. I want solar on my roof. And they don't realize solar only, you're now generating energy when it's at its cheapest, at its cleanest. And if you're not storing it, you're not really able to play the market game and, peak shift when you're consuming energy. So you lose a lot of the economic benefits. So yeah, we certainly we have a saying internally, let's kill bad projects early and often. And that's all about, let's not send people on wild goose chases, chasing bad projects because it's bad for everyone.
So before I forget, what has happened or what is currently happening and maybe the near future on the storage side? Because that seems like that's been a big challenge.
Yeah, well, right now, certainly lithium-ion batteries are the primary source of storage. They're kind of the sexy object that everyone is super interested in. The technology is fairly well mature now, and the price point has come down quite significantly. Still, for you and I to go and put a battery pack in our garage, it's still quite expensive at a personal level. But for a business, the economics are significant and you can gain a huge amount of benefit. Typically, you're able to store energy for like 2 to 4 hours is kind of the sweet spot. And that's enough to be able to, charge your battery during the day when you've got access to solar or wind energy, and then use it when energy is at its most expensive or have it there on standby if you need to ride through an outage, as an example. So the technology works, it's great, but there's huge amounts of innovation going on in this space, different chemistries. People are even talking about quantum batteries of being able to, I don't even know how that works. Flow batteries using things like vanadium and pushing liquid through a system and storing energy. So there's lots going on, but at scale, it's lithium-ion batteries today. And there's lots of good providers in the market that offer them in all shapes and sizes. So we help customers understand what size of battery will meet their desired objectives.
That's interesting. So when someone comes in onto your platform, because you have a platform that they basically come onto, correct?
Yeah, I'd think of it like how you use Expedia or Airbnb today. You've got some simple inputs that here's my location, here's my energy use profile, here's my business priority. And then behind the scenes, an Expedia or Airbnb crunches all your numbers, gives you some packaged options, and you select which one is best for you. I'd think about that and just put that into an energy context.
Yeah. So basically, if I understand your business model correct, you have something agreed to where you guys get some back-end commission based on whatever decision they make. You don't guide them to a particular decision, but you're the clearinghouse or marketplace, for them. And then you kind of are constantly tweaking how people are entering their data, how others are offering their services. So you can kind of automate as much as possible. And then are you also offering hands-on consulting as needed as part of Veckta, so you can help them when there's some additional hand-holding that's needed?
That's right. So in terms of the business model for commercial industrial business leaders, it's like a platform access fee, a SaaS fee, just to be able to ingest all their data, get the insights, run the analyses, and get access to the marketplace. But it's a really nominal fee compared to what they pay a consultant, order of magnitudes less. And then, yes, suppliers who win work in the marketplace, only when they win work, they pay a small success fee on the total contract value that they win. And the suppliers love it because they're now being fed this really highly bankable, viable project that's being vetted. Today, they spend a huge amount of time and money chasing these opportunities. And their biggest competitor is indecision from the customer because they're trying to sell them a widget and the customer's going, do I believe you or the next person or the next person? Which leads to then trust, indecision, no action. So it's all about just bringing trust into the system. And by feeding suppliers these opportunities, then their cost of sale should go down. The system should come down in price. They become more competitive. And then that's good for the buyers. So it becomes a self-fulfilling cycle.
And do you also work with individuals who want to be like off-grid and they want to know what they should do in their house, or are you just focused on business side?
Yeah, just business today. I'd love to, our ultimate vision is we want to ensure that globally everyone has access to a thriving energy future, clean, affordable, secure power. Today, businesses have access to the money that have got the biggest energy consumption needs, the biggest emission profile. So we know by getting that right at the most complex end of the spectrum, then we can come down the complexity over time.
Yeah. And so talk to me about really what can solar do? Because, I consider myself a conservationist. I have one guy who is the brother of a former client who's an ultra right winger, who's a super guy. He's a wonderful guy, but some of his stuff he forwards, I would never agree with. But, some of the stuff that I see from that side of the spectrum is, solar really doesn't pay for itself. Wind energy doesn't pay for itself, blah, blah, blah. So what really can solar achieve for a business by itself? Or you also mentioned wind or whatever else they might use. What can someone expect on the solar side?
Yeah, I'd say the default action that customers have deployed today is, I need to be seen to be doing something. So I'm just going to get someone to put some solar panels on my roof. And, you gain some economic benefit of doing that. You're generating free energy during the day when the sun's up. I think the way the utilities are structuring their commercial models, they're trying to make that harder. So the grid and the utilities are also have access to huge amounts of that free energy during the day. So they don't need it. So they're not going to compensate you anymore if you overgenerate to push that back in the grid. It's almost, has a negative effect for them. So now they're trying to position it such that if you can sell us power when we really need it, at the peak hours when everyone's coming home from work, turning everything on, and the sun's gone down, so we're not generating all that free energy, we'll compensate you for it. So that's the opportunity of combining with other technologies, storage, gas generators, things like that, is you can now sell power back when you can be compensated handsomely for it. But yeah, solar alone, there's definitely some misconceptions. People wonder why, if they've got solar and they're generating energy during the day and the utility turns the power off, why is my power gone off? I'm generating my own energy. But legally, you have to disconnect. Like, you can't be pushing energy into the grid in case someone's working on the line. So you have to be able to store it. So your power has to also go off. So solar only, it's amazing. It's free energy, but you have to know how to use it to gain the most out of it.
Interesting. And so how much solar is generated on either a cloudy day or a rainy day? Is it just zero or is it some?
No, you're almost always generating something. And that's what we look at, David, is we look at historical data and we then project what the next 25, 30 years is going to potentially look like. Obviously, we can't predict how many cloudy days there are going to be 22 years from now, but we look at how have you used energy consistently over the last few years? How has the economy operated? What are the fuel prices? What are the utility rates? What's the solar radiance at your location? And then we combine those hundreds of thousands of variables and create a technical and financial business case to weigh up the pros and cons of deploying a system. But there's definitely a lot of things that influence the optimal solution for sure.
And so over time, Veckta is basically developing the data so that you can be brought into a growing number of geographical regions and give them very validated data on what they can expect, because you're not only talking about the equipment's capabilities, but you're talking about, you understand the environmental statistics that go in that region.
Yeah, we know the emission profile of the grid where they're located. So here's what your emissions would look like if you keep consuming from the grid. Here's the benefits of doing X, Y, or Z. We know the outage rates at certain locations. So we're able to give them all these insights. For us, it's all about data, generate really valuable insights, which drive interest and action. And I think this is a key part of the industry need today. Is it's kind of, the statistic is from CDP, which is one of the kind of primary ESG reporting bodies, is less than 1% of companies globally have a credible energy transition strategy. And that's because people have set these targets, but they haven't actually thought about how they implement and achieve those targets. And they're taking on some of the low-hanging fruit opportunities of reporting their carbon emissions and tracking when people fly and drive and how much energy they use the office. But these are all really negligible effects. And it's almost, the lipstick on the pig analogy. How do we help them make those big needle-moving changes?
Yeah. Now, I think I noticed something on your website where you said, if I'm remembering correctly, 40% of what project costs are soft costs?
Yeah.
In projects?
Yeah, the statistic is, and this is done by an independent body, is between 30 and 70% of project costs today are soft costs. So consulting, engineering, procurement, contracts, negotiations. So our role is, how do we compress all that out of the system? Because in our mind, that's all just wasted padding. Let's invest in the infrastructure, the construction, the operation. So let's get people to the point of being able to do that as cheaply as possible.
Interesting. And I think that's great that you're doing that. And then what about, do you find in projects, are there soft costs that involve, and you kind of alluded to it on how you're storing the energy or not, but are there soft costs involved in our energy usage at the business level that have to do with people's habits? And if that's true, do you advise, or do you have people in your marketplace that advise on how to improve in those areas? Because aren't those also some significant savings?
Yeah. So within our marketplace, we've got energy efficiency companies and companies who have got the likes of building management systems. And so our advice is always reduce your energy consumption as much as possible before deploying a system. There's no point in building a system if you're then going to reduce your overall energy consumption. So deploy energy efficiency opportunities. And you touched on this before, LED lighting. It may be air conditioning unit switch outs using heat pumps. It might be just installing a building management system that coordinates all these things and turning things on and off based on the cost profile. And then, yes, then there's human dynamics associated with all of that as well. Behavior can really influence how energy is consumed. So we advise customers to do that first, and we can help them understand what the value of doing that upfront would be. We don't necessarily model that or deploy it because there's lots of different techniques. And then we want them to think about an on-site energy system. Once they've done both of them, they can then think about buying renewable energy credits or buying what's called virtual power purchase agreements. So sourcing energy from a clean source, but you're not really buying the energy direct. You're just contractually buying clean energy. So on paper, you're clean, but you're not actually gaining the operational benefits.
Interesting. Well, when you look back, how long has the company been in business?
Since 2019.
2019. And how long have you been involved in this type of work?
Yeah, so spent my career with consulting and engineering firms. My last role was leading the world's largest energy engineering firm's consulting practice for this discipline. So I've been around this sector for many years and supporting commercial industrial businesses all around the world. I've had the pleasure of working in Canada, Dubai, Iraq, Australia, the US. So I've seen everything from a mine site to an LNG facility down to the local microbrewery. And we've got an amazing team of people who come from supply chain and procurement, software development, energy. So we're combining all those experiences to create that kind of marketplace platform that's really needed to unlock the sector.
Awesome. So when you look back at all that experience, what's the most meaningful project to you? What's the most meaningful project you ever worked on?
Yeah, so there's two that I think the real catalytic one for me was after the Second Gulf War. I was asked if I was an environmental scientist at the time. I was asked if I'd go into southern Iraq, live on the US Army base in Basra, and support oil and gas companies to move into the region to really accelerate the development of the oil and gas fields. And that for me was the turning point where here we were unlocking some of the biggest energy reserves in the world to feed our energy needs. And yet the local populace was surviving on 2 to 4 hours of power a day, really unreliable. They're surviving in, 120 degree heat. Businesses can't run, they run on diesel gen sets. And it just showed to me the infrastructure had obviously been decimated through that war. And so the lack of infrastructure then has huge knock-on impacts in terms of access to energy, which then impacts access to education, access to water, access to climate-controlled environments, which then lead people to do terrible things to survive. And so we were being mortar attacked most evenings. We were, constantly on the lookout for roadside bombs. We were being educated by the intelligence people on the ground that these aren't insurgents coming in and doing this. This is people being offered $500 to feed their family, and they'll, people will do whatever it takes to kind of survive. And so that was the true eye opener for me. And I didn't know that would lead to Veckta at the time, but it sort of deeply challenged my perception of here we are in the Western world, thinking that we've got access to this free, reliable energy. And there are a lot of parallels, actually. We don't want to admit it, but the grid is extremely vulnerable, and it wouldn't take many dominoes to fall for our power to go off. And so that's what we want to prevent, is that you and I aren't in that position, trying to survive. How do we ensure that everyone can thrive?
Yeah. Totally. Now, you said there were 2 stories. Was there a second story? Because that's a good one.
Yeah.
So close with that one if you want to,
I'd say the other one is just when I first started my career, I was deeply passionate about making sure that I earned my stripes, worked hard. And so I'd do sort of 100-hour weeks working in the fields, working with crews operating yellow iron, and we'd dig up old contaminated areas. And I've got one famous site called Burnt Timber 15. It was nestled in the Rocky Mountains in the middle of nowhere, and it was a well site that was drilled way back in the 1930s. And we completely remediated the whole site and retreated it back to Crown forestry land. and I built a little tent pad up in the corner so that one day I can go back and enjoy kind of the fruits of our labor. But that was incredible. Camping on the site, wild horses, bears, you name it. We were out there in the wilderness, and very memorable project.
Totally cool. Totally cool. Well, Gareth, let's close out on that. Those are two great stories. So how do people learn more about what you guys are doing at Veckta?
Yeah, super active on LinkedIn for sure. So LinkedIn for Garreth Evans or Veckta. And then our website is an amazing resource for anything energy transition related. So www.veckta.com.
Fabulous. Thanks so much for being on the show. This has been fun and very educational.
Yeah, you're awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Gareth. I felt like I made a new friend, and the guy is really sharp. So maybe you want to check out Veckta, veckta.com. Check it out. And check out our habitly.com site for soft skills training, our sponsor of the show. We really enjoyed having you on. Leave us a comment, leave us a rating, send us an email. You know what you think, how we can improve. Love to hear that. Maybe what we did well, we need to do more of it. That would be great too. But it's bye for now, but we will be back with more guests soon.